It is an opportunity to try and take the development process, development planning, the parameters in which we look at the development path of our economies as an opportunity to prepare for both responding to climate change but also to putting our economies on a different trajectory. The Asia-Pacific Adaptation Network forms part of the Global Adaptation Network. It is a critical node, and it was indeed the pioneer in this Global Adaptation Network that began to put in place a means and a platform by which we could bring scientists, policymakers, experts, civil society representatives and the private sector together around the table. It is as much about understanding what the adaptation agenda is as it is to develop from the lessons that we have learned so far, but also with the kinds of ideas that may soon mainstream adaptation into development planning as a means of response. UNEP, together with many of the agencies, has been very grateful to have been entrusted with a role to help bring about both the Global Adaptation Network and to support the Asia-Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Network. At the heart of much of the work that you will undertake in the next 2 days is to try and sift through both the priorities that we need to set, the approaches that we can take in terms of the governance, in terms of intersectoral and cross-sectoral approaches, and also in terms of practical experiences of what has worked and what is likely to work. Clearly, in terms of the agenda, we have 3 major areas in which adaptation agendas are evolving, and I hope also over the next 2 days you will focus in terms of providing us with the first analysis and also further guidance on how to move forward. The first area is building resilience. Clearly, in the context of global warming, with all the factors of uncertainty and change that they will impose upon our societies, working around the concept of resilience has to be a central pillar of the adaptation agenda. Without greater resilience, our vulnerability will simply grow exponentially, and the ability to cope with global warming in terms of all of its implications across different sectors, be they agriculture, energy, transport, infrastructure, coastal zone development, or indeed sometimes truly the survival of whole nation states, will not progress. Building resilience is a core concept that has emerged both out of the ecology and ecosystems perspective, but it is also one that is equally relevant in understanding that adaptation is neither a sectoral nor a single agenda issue. It is about combining the potential for acting in unison, in synergy, and in complementarity. At the heart of adaptation has to be a concept whereby across all sectors of our economy and our communities, we build the strength to be able to deal with change. Much of that depends also on good science, and that is the second pillar. Building on the scientific knowledge we today have, being able to deploy science in understanding how climate change adaptation strategies can evolve, taking the latest work from the IPCC and many of the institutes and institutions in your region in particular, and bringing them to the table to allow us to better understand what are the potential scenarios we will have to deal with and how can we respond to them in terms of practical measures. Thirdly, partnerships. We know today that adaptation is not something that governments can simply declare or undertake in terms of development planning. Partners in the scientific community, in civil societies, at the community level, and in the private sector are critical to enable adaptation strategies and approaches to evolve that allow us to mobilize across all sectors of society. I hope that particularly with this meeting in Bangkok, you will be able to give us some of the lessons that have already been learned, and a number of your countries and institutions are in fact pioneers in this area. In the United Nations Environment Programme, we have looked to the Asia-Pacific region as a frontier of trying to develop the practice of adaptation, and more importantly, how quickly to feed some of these lessons and experiences also into the global negotiation process. Clearly, as the international community struggles to find a way forward in the context of the UNFCCC negotiations, there is no time to lose. Adaptation becomes more difficult, more expensive, and sometimes more painful the longer we wait. The concept that adaptation also is an activity that is somehow parallel or next to the development planning process is one that I think we have all thrown overboard. Clearly, development planning, development processes, the transitions towards a low-carbon economy, a more resilient economy, are integral to the way that each of your nations and communities will have to think about development in the future. In the United Nations Environment Programme, this has become a key mantra in the way that we look at the climate change agenda. We cannot separate and single out certain areas alone. We have to try and bring the connection between different opportunities to act, resources across different sectors, and capacities also, be they between private sector and government, or be they between different countries, emerging economies, developing economies, least developed countries. It is in trying to bring this together that the network has its greatest opportunity to contribute both to the practice on adaptation, but also to inform the directions of future negotiations under the Climate Change Convention. This will be equally important in Cancun as it will be at future meetings of the Climate Change Convention, and the very existence of the Global Adaptation Network is in fact an outcome of the UNFCCC decisions that were taken a number of years ago. On behalf of the United Nations Environment Programme, let me once again commit our full support and commitment to the work that you are doing, and in the way that you are leading some of the thinking across the globe today in informing our decisions for tomorrow and the future. We are committed to working with you, through you, and we hope that you will also use us, the United Nations Environment Programme, but also many of our sister agencies, our colleagues in the World Bank, the regional development banks, and many of the other regional platforms, be they in the intergovernmental context or indeed in the private sector of our global economy. Adaptation is a priority. It is not the poor cousin alongside mitigation, and it will be central to many communities across the world to be able to cope with what is now quite clearly a set of very real challenges. Thank you once again, and I wish you a very successful meeting in Bangkok.
Ladies and gentlemen, I also want to inform you that this opening session is being webcast. So it's not only who we are in the room listening, but outside the world is also listening you. With that, I'd like to inform you that the Ministry of Environment of Japan is one of the key supporters in the adaptation work, and particularly on the adaptation knowledge management work in the region. And with us, as I mentioned, we have Dr. Hyodoki Mori-san, the President of IGS from Japan, and representing the government of Japan here in this forum. And it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Mori-san to deliver his speech.
Thank you very much, Babu, for your kind introduction, and good morning, everyone. His Excellency Virachai, the Minister of Science and Technology, Thailand, His Excellency Mr. Fomina, the Minister of Natural Resources and Environment of Samoa, His Excellency Mr. Tiranda, the Climate Change Ambassador from Sweden, Dr. Schaefer-Preus, the Vice President of ADB, Dr. Park, Regional Director of UNEP, and Dr. Masa Watanabe, the Chairperson of the Asia-Pacific Adaptation Network. On behalf of IGES and also on behalf of the Ministry of Environment Japan, we would like to welcome all of you to the Asia-Pacific Adaptation Forum 2010. This forum is jointly organized by the Regional Climate Change Adaptation Knowledge Platform for Asia and the Asia-Pacific Adaptation Network. A distinct feature of this forum is of its multi-stakeholder nature. In fact, participants are not only government officials from countries in the region, but also representatives from international organizations and their initiatives, experts from universities and research institutes, and leaders from NGOs and the private sector. This is certainly a reflection of wide interests held by many stakeholders of the region in various issues concerning climate change adaptation in the region. The issue of melting glacier in Himalayas, rising sea levels threatening islands in the Pacific, and coastal areas in Asian megadeltas are well known to all of us. Certainly these problems have to be more accurately predicted and understood at a local level where real action takes place. But these issues are, at the same time, those of transnational nature, which cannot be handled by a single country. So this is one of the reasons why this kind of regional forum is considered very essential and useful. The Asia-Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Network was launched in October last year here in Bangkok. That was the first among all regional networks working under the framework of the Global Adaptation Network initiated by UNEP. Therefore, it is hoped that this forum will set a good example for other regions to follow by sharing our rich discussions and messages with the rest of the world. In this respect, I'm very happy to inform you that the Adaptation Network has started its operations also now in Central Asian countries to deal with issues specific to the sub-region. To this end, Government of Japan and IJES are happy to support, together with CENSA, ADB, UNEP, and other organizations, this regional endeavor, hand in hand, with many participants we see in this forum. Lastly, I would like to once again welcome all of you to this forum and look forward to active and fruitful discussions in the next 2 days. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have already heard that the immense support we have received from the government of Thailand from the very beginning during the opening of the launching of the network in the region, and also the continued support that we are receiving from them. It's my immense pleasure to request His Excellency's Minister for Science and Technology of Thailand, Mr. Virachai, to deliver his speech.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to be here with you on this first Asia-Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Forum 2010, Mainstreaming Adaptation for Development Planning. I am especially happy to be part of this initiative that was launched by Prime Minister Abhisit Vejjajiva during Bangkok Climate Talks last year. The Royal Thai Government is pleased to join this gathering in partnership with the United Nations Environment Programme and other partners, such as the Swedish Environment Secretariat for Asia, the Stockholm Environment Institute, and the governments of Japan and Sweden. Climate change is a serious challenge for development. While funding for climate risk management is expanding, it does not even come close to what is needed to fully address the rising risk. So there is a need, an urgent need for us to be more efficient to handle these issues. In this regard, the forum arrived well in time as the international community embarks on the pre-Cancun meeting to secure a new global framework and device to help developing countries adapt and prepare themselves for the effect of climate change. While going over the agenda of the two-day programs, I noticed that the approach of this forum is somewhat unique, as you are going to debate and deliberate on the process of mainstreaming climate change adaptation. This sounds promising when adaptation is no longer different than the process of integrating climate change in development of a country or a region. Building up resilience to increasing climate variability is the most significant challenge facing many developing countries, and I firmly believe that adaptation, while necessary in and of itself, can also serve the need to meet the development objective of our countries. Ladies and gentlemen, the UN Environment Programme, in partnership with the Swedish International Development Agency, Ministry of Environment Japan, Asian Development Bank, and Stockholm Environment Institute, is implementing the Regional Climate Change Adaptation Network and Platform with members from government to international organizations and from scientists to practitioners. The overall objective of this network and platform is to help build climate resilience in vulnerable human systems, ecosystems, and economies through the mobilization of knowledge and technology to support adaptation policies in setting, planning, and practice. And here, I do emphasize the importance of technology. In Asia and the Pacific, a series of consultations has concluded that the identification of gaps and needs in current adaptation knowledge, the development of tools and methods for good adaptation practice,